I'm Tim Strange from Strange Motion Rod and Custom and the Strange Motion Way. And this video is going to show you some of the steps to do the install for the brand new QA1 coilover kit for the 88 to 98 Chevy and GMC 1500 trucks. I call them CKs. Industry kind of calls them OBS trucks. And you'll lower this thing down, big sway bars, coilovers, and it'll handle like a slot car. So we've got it up on the lift. We got some jack stands also holding it. I'm going to go ahead and take all this stuff out. We're going to do tubular A-arms. We're getting rid of the original spring. There's going to be coilovers. We're going to take the sway bar off. There'll be a big sway bar. And so I'm going to take all this apart, and then we'll come back to you to show you all the templates and all the cutting and fabrication that needs to be done. So you can see we've removed the original coil spring, which be very careful with that. It's a very dangerous job. We used a coil spring compressor to properly take it out. We took the ball joints, the lower A-arm, the upper A-arms. We're going to remove all this stuff, the original mounts, because this goes on here. It's the upper bridge, which the A-arms will mount off of here, and this will be the upper coilover mount also. You got to do quite a bit of fabrication and cutting in here. First, we'll remove this cup, just the top part of this cup. And then we've got some templates that we'll show you that we'll put in here to line up some bolt holes. But first, we're going to cut this cup off. QA1 supplies you with 2 templates. These are very important. So we've got all this stuff out of the way. The original upper A-arm mounts are your locators for this, for your lining up the holes for that upper bridge. The curves match the frame. It just simply sits in there, and you'll mark that hole. And we'll go up from above and drill that before we cut this out of the way. All these tabs and this mount will come off. Same thing in the back. Here's the back one. The curve of the frame lines that up. Sit that in there like that. And you mark that hole. You'll be able to see that from the top. And we'll drill those out to 7/16. So I will do that next before we cut the tabs off. So I've drilled those 2 holes from the top. We actually had to take, this is the driver's side we're working on right now, we had to take the shaft that goes from the steering column to the steering box off to be able to get to this back area here. So now we've got all kinds of room in here. We've got the brake lines pulled up out of the way. So I'm going to come around the top and use the plasma cutter and rough cut these off. These upper tabs, these U brackets on the frame must come off because they're in the way for the new upper mount bridge. So I'm going to use the plasma cutter. Be very, very careful with cutting around the brake lines and everything. I said we've taken all the bolts and the clamps off and everything's pulled up right up here where you can't see it. Got in here with the plasma cutter and cut both of these U brackets off that the upper stock A-arm mounted to, both of these. So to get the bridge on here to line up to drill more holes, I got to grind this totally flat. The bridge sits on here flat on both sides. And I'm going to grind some of this down because the bridge actually comes into here. I call it a bridge. It's the upper mount for the A-arms and has the upper mount for the coilovers. Finished cleaning, grinding all these off that I plasma cutted these U-bolt brackets off. If you remember back to those little templates that we stuck in those U-shaped brackets, there's a hole here and there's a hole here. I'm going to use that to line this bridge up temporarily to drill some more holes. I will tighten them down and then drill some more holes from the top. This upper bridge mount up, bolting them up to the 2 holes that we used that original cardboard templates on. And I say mock it up because now we're bolting this down, and I'm going to climb up in the engine compartment and drill the rest of these holes through here. That will locate these 2 holes And then I'll remove this, and we have one more template and one more area to cut out. So here's the third template for the front. I removed the bridge that I drilled all the holes. We had to mock it up because we had to drill through after the 2 locating holes. And then we'll put these bolts in, and we'll trace this in here. Line these 2 up. And this is, trace it on the inside. This will get rid of those factory fingers that held the coil spring. So we're putting coilovers. So we need a little bit of a clearance in there. So I'm going to cut this out, grind it, and actually I'm going to take this time to paint this real quick and let it dry before we bolt this bridge back on for the final time. So you can use a cutoff wheel to do this. It'll take a little more time. We have a very well-equipped shop here. We're pretty lucky. I'm going to use the plasma cutter and cut on my template marking and then clean it up with the grinder a little. So we've cleaned this all up and I put some paint on it, let it dry. And now I'm going to bolt the bridge in. There's 8 bolts that we have drilled. Bolt this in for the final time. Washer on the bottom and a lock nut. Tighten these all down and we'll be ready to start on the A-arms and installing the coilovers. This is the upper A-arm assembly. It comes with a ball joint already pressed into it. We threaded in the rod ends. You want to take the jam nut all the way up till they stop, and a good starting point for the alignment is leaving 2 to 3 threads. We'll leave these loose until we do the alignment. How you figure out which one's left and which one's right is you kind of eyeball center of that to center here. The ball joint slightly towards the front. It's 4.8. It's about 5.5 to that way. So this will be the driver's side because we want the ball joint towards the front, the shortest arm. If you really look, this back part of the tubular A-arm is a little bit longer. So there's some other assembly. There's these misalignment shims that go in here, and there's spacers. 2 of these little spacers slide onto each one of those misalignment shims. They will go right into here on both sides of the rod end. That will slide into that bridge that we have bolted up already. When we go over there, it'll be a little hard to see, so I'm going to show you here. These are part of the alignment. There's a pin on that bridge that we have bolted in, and the pin sits in here. So you'll slide these bolts in through the bracket. The bracket will sit right here. This will catch on that pin. Same thing, it'll come through the other side. That bolt has a flat on it. That's the eccentric that they have built in to help ease the alignment, and it'll line up on a pin here. At the alignment shop, when they move the bolts this way with those pins, it'll adjust your A-arms to get into spec. So that's a very important thing. I wanted to show you before we put it in because it's a little hard to see those pins filming while I'm up in the inner fender well. So we're going to take this over and start assembling it on the truck. So we're bringing the A-arm over with our misalignment shims and our spacers, making sure they do not fall out. We'll line this up, slide that in. You can see those pins right there. So this goes in, and you want to line that pin up so it sits on there. Both front and back of each individual mount. And I'll nut and bolt it. You can see when that eccentric gets turned at the alignment shop, that moves that A-arms in and out for proper specs. I will tighten these up and then move to the lower. Going to install the lower A-arm. Comes with these aluminum bushings, the sleeves. There's two different thicknesses. The narrower one goes to the back. Make sure they're flush. Bigger one goes to the front. These simply go in the original mounts. Bolt them up. New hardware. And I'll nut and bolt these and tighten them down.
I'm going to show you a quick video on how to install the QA1 front coilover assembly. This is how it comes out of the box. You're going to want to pull this out to length. You're going to run the lock collar shoulder up all the way to the bottom. I like to run this down, put a little bit of anti-seize. A little bit of this will go a long way. You can run it between the two collars because you're going to move this up when it's all said and done, so this keeps it a little cleaner. Then you run the spring seat all the way down. And the shock comes with a stainless steel sleeve for the shock, but the kit comes with a bearing setup that we're going to use. We put a little bit of anti-seize on here just to keep it from rusting over time. Set that down. Set your spring on top. Put your collar on. Then I'm going to run this down just to get the slack out of it. Okay, next we're going to put in the pivots. I've already got the snap rings in one side, so they just slide in. They shouldn't take much pressure. They should just slide right in. You don't want to beat them in or damage them. There we go. You'll take your snap rings. You want to make sure it gets down in the lip. You'll kind of hear it click in, or you can actually physically see it too. And then we got one more. There we go. They're ready to go on.
So Ryan showed you putting the Heims in on the shock. It's got two more spacers. See the difference of the spacer? That's flat. That's got a slight recess. That recess goes on there on each side and then slides right in there. We'll go ahead and tighten this one down with a washer and a lock nut. And then start on the lower. The lower A-arm requires no spacers. Swing the lower A-arm up, line up. So there's torque specs on everything here. The lower shock mount gets torqued to 70 foot-pounds. As we put on the new ball joint into the spindle, you will torque the lower one to 75 foot-pounds and then slowly tighten it a little bit, just a little bit increments until you can get the cotter pin in. Very important to torque these properly and to get the cotter pins in. So we'll torque these and cotter pin them. There is a rubber snubber that goes in here. Once the truck has weight on it, the A-arm will pivot up and we can put this snubber in.